Welcome to DIY Homebrew. My name is Jay, and today we're going to be discussing how much malt extract do you need. So, I'm going to use Mr. Beer as the analogy, but this isn't the only kit or only method out there. With Mr. Beer, you'll usually receive a 2-pound, just shy of 2-pound can of the heavy syrup, the malt extract that we discussed. This gets poured into your pan with like 4 cups of water, which gets heated up, diluted, and put into your 2-gallon Mr. Beer fermenter after you put in a gallon of water. So, gallon of water in here, a few cups of water on the stove in a pan with the extract put into it, that dumped into here with cold water already in and filled up to the line 2 mark the rest of the way with water. Now, these are great, and by themselves, they make a good, passable beer, especially when you adhere to the temperature checks. You know, you keep your area where you're fermenting a good 65 to 75 degrees. Now, from their website, they actually sell what's called a booster pack, and they sell Deluxe kits and craft kits. So bear with me. In the basic one, the basic can, which I don't have one right here, but if you buy it on Amazon or from Walmart or some retailer, odds are it's just going to be that can. It's going to be just shy of 2 pounds of the extract. Now, without getting into the math of it, that's about as strong as you need to make 2 gallons of beer, 1 pound per gallon. But I prefer something a little stronger, both in alcohol volume and in flavor, which are 2 different things but are related, and we'll get to that. So with Mr. Beer, you could buy the little canister, and from their website, I believe it automatically comes with a couple of boosters. These are sugar mixes. Now, when you add sugar to beer, it actually thins out the beer, and the best way I can describe that is it becomes dry like a champagne with too much sugar. Now, the mix that they use is some complicated sugar mix, dextrose, maldextrose, some other stuff, and it basically is supposed to up the alcohol volume without taking away too much flavor. The other option is a Deluxe pack. Now, that's the canister that I discussed, and it actually comes with extra liquid malt extract in pouches. Now, that is going to increase both the flavor and the alcohol as well. Maybe not quite to the same level that straight sugar or their booster pack does, but pretty close. Honestly, giving yeast more sugar to eat, more fermentable things in the mix, makes the beer stronger in the alcohol side, but also I like the extra extract because it ups the flavor, the mouthfeel, the overall flavor you would expect from a beer, be it a stout or an ale or something to that effect. Now, there's also their craft kits. Now, the craft kits by themselves are, I think they're like 3-pound containers of the syrup by themselves. Perfect. Doesn't need anything extra. Gonna cost a little more. But the basic rule of this is to have approximately 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of liquid malt extract per gallon made. So your typical Mr. Beer, what I would recommend in a 2-gallon container, could be a different container altogether, but any fermenter that's 2 gallons, I personally recommend between 1 and 1.5 pounds per gallon. And for me, my actual preference is close to, without getting in, again, to the very difficult math that we're probably not ready for yet, my preference is about 1.25 pounds per gallon. So in a 2-gallon kit, I would prefer to have 2.5 pounds of extract. Now, there's a couple of ways to accomplish that. You can buy one of these 3-pound cans from a few different places, and you could do the math with a food scale, which I do have over there, and a bowl, and you could figure out what comes out to 2.5. This is a 3-er. You could dump this whole thing in there, and it would be quite strong. The yeast might have trouble at some point eating all the sugars, but it's right at the border, especially if you use 3 pounds and not the 3.3 in this. And the other option, this comes straight from their website, is to use some dry malt extract as well. Now, again, the stuff that Mr. Beer is selling is already hopped in the liquid form, so no problem there. And they say add a cup or 2 of this, which again is this powdery stuff that resembles creamer, really, powdered creamer, but in the way it feels. But a cup or 2 of this in a 2-gallon fermenter. So the way to do that would actually be add this powder to your cold water in here, and then boil it, and then add the syrup that they give you, because it's already hopped, in there. And the reason I would recommend that is because this stuff clumps pretty easily, and you don't want it clumping inside your fermenter. But if you get out a blender and cold water, and you put, say, 6 cups of water in your blender, it could be 6, 8, and then you put this in the blender and you blend it real fast, it's going to eliminate most of those clumps. Then that water can go in here with your Mr. Beer syrup, which isn't this, but like it, and you can heat all that up and have about a gallon in here, okay? Now, when you do that, 1 gallon plus the 6 or so cups of water is going to bring this up to 1.5 gallons. You are going to have to add enough water to get to the 2 mark. And this is going to be not so hot that it burns or breaks your fermenter, but also it's going to be a little warm for the yeast. So you may have to cool down the wort first, or you could just put the heated up wort into the fermenter that already has 1 gallon of water, add a little more cold water, and let it cool. Once the temperature gets down to the mid-60s to mid-70s, you can dump that yeast straight in. Some people are going to tell you that you need to hydrate the yeast, and it's true. There's really no downside to hydrating it, but in these kits, it's okay. You're not going to lose that much yeast, particularly if you're very careful about your starting temperature being within that acceptable range. If you do want to do a yeast starter, the instructions are usually on the back. I mean, not a yeast starter, but a yeast hydration. The instructions are on the back of the Nottingham, for instance. That's a different brand of yeast. And basically, it's heat some water up in the microwave, but not so hot that it kills yeast. And once it's about in the 65 to 75 range, you put the yeast in, you mix it up, and then that is what goes in your fermenter. And it doesn't make a huge difference in adding just that little bit more of water to your fermenter. But as a general rule, back to the topic, you want to keep your liquid malt extract to 1 pound to 1.5 pounds, and I prefer 1.25 pounds. Now, if you're going to use this, as a general rule, the dry stuff is about 20% stronger than the liquid stuff. So 1 pound of dry malt extract is kind of like putting in 1.2 pounds of liquid in your wort, in your water mixture. I don't recommend putting in a whole pound for a 2-gallon batch, really, but you should understand the weight difference, the potency difference. But that also means that, as a general rule, this is about 20% weaker than this. So it would take 1 pound of this to equal 0.8 of this, or let's see, maybe I have that backwards. It takes 1 pound of this is kind of like 1.2 pounds of this. That's what I mean to say. 1 pound of this is like 1.2 pounds of this, okay? And you can do the math to backwards convert that if you need to. But as a general rule, and you'll be starting with your liquids, keep it to 1 pound to 1.5 pounds. Experiment a little bit. I would say right off the bat, start with more than a pound if you can. Go to 1.25 right off the bat and consider adjusting from there. All right, remember, like, share, subscribe, and as again, this is DIY Homebrew, and I'm Jay. Thanks.